Welcome to Sales Simplified. Today we're going to talk about dragging and locking formulas. And so dragging and locking formulas go hand in hand, and it allows us to create one base formula and then make lots of derivative copies of that formula so that we don't have to type it over and over and over again. It can be a huge time saver. And so if we look in cell B2, we can see in our formula bar that we're multiplying A2 times 100. And so when we're looking at A2, A is the column reference and 2 is the row reference. And so when we drag a formula down, we can expect Excel to automatically increment our row references by 1 for every row that we drag the formula down. So let's select cell B2 and see this in action. We're going to move our mouse over the lower right hand corner until we get a crosshair like we have now. We'll click with the left mouse button, drag one row down, and then release. And so we can see here that we're multiplying A3 times 100 now. And then if we drag down one more row, we can see that we're multiplying A4 times 100. And so let's go ahead and drag this formula to the end of our listing here. Let's select the cell with the formula, move the mouse over the lower right-hand corner, and then double-click. And that will drag our formula all the way to the end of our listing, and we can see on our last cell that we're multiplying A11 times 100. So now let's come up to cell F2. And here we can see we're multiplying F1 times 10. And so we're going to be dragging this formula to the right. And when we drag a formula to the right instead of down, we are auto-incrementing the column instead of the row reference. And so when we drag this formula to the right by 1, we can see here that we are now multiplying, instead of F1 times 10, we're multiplying G1 times 10. And so let's go ahead and drag this formula all the way to column J. And we can see now that in cell J2, we're multiplying J1 times 10. So again, when we drag formulas down, we're auto-incrementing the row references. And when we drag formulas to the right, we're auto-incrementing the column references. So let's go to our second tab. And so here in cell B2, we basically have the same formula. We're still multiplying A2 times 100, but this time the 100 is in cell B1 and we're referencing B1 instead of having a static reference to 100. And so when we drag this formula down, we can expect both of our row references to auto-increment. But that's going to cause us a problem because we only want the row reference for our column A cells to increment. We don't want B1 to auto-increment because we want it to keep locked in cell B1 where we have that 100 at. And so let's go ahead and drag our formula down one row and see what we're talking about here. Now when we select cell B3, we can see that we're multiplying A3 times B2. And what we really want is that B2 to remain B1 no matter how far down we drag this formula. So let's come back here to our first formula and type a $sign in front of the 1 in B1. Typing that $sign will prevent it from auto-incrementing as we drag the formula down. So we'll hit enter to save that change, and then we'll reselect our cell and drag our formula down again. And so now we can see here we're multiplying A2 times B1, A3 times B1, A4 times B1, and so on. And so let's come over here to cell F2. And again, we're still multiplying F1 times 10, but in this scenario, the 10 is in cell E2. So we want column E to remain locked. We do not want it to auto-increment as we drag this formula to the right, even though we still want our cell reference in row 1 to auto-increment. So let's go ahead and just double check, and we drag this formula one cell over, and we can see now we are multiplying G1 times F2. And so again, we want that F2 to stay E2 instead of auto-incrementing. So let's come back to our first formula, and this time we want to lock our column reference, so we're going to type our $sign in front of the E instead of the 2. And so we'll hit enter to save, and then let's reselect the cell with our formula and drag the formula to the right. And then let's go ahead and check our very last cell here, and we have I1 times E2. So even though we dragged the formula over 4 cells, we still are referencing E2. So I hope you found this helpful. Subscribe, comment below if there are other topics you'd like to see covered. Have a great week.